All right, today's workshop is a very important one for me to teach. It has to do with habits of successful college students. Next week we're going to talk, and the week after, we're going to talk about time management, how to organize yourself so that you get everything done. Today it's habits of successful college students, and one of the things I want to say just to kind of introduce this topic, I've been teaching at this college for a long time. I won't tell you how long because you get scared, but a long, long time. And I have watched students be very successful, and I've watched other students not be successful and end up sort of dropping out, not reaching their goals. The two main reasons why a student would not be successful is, first, their skills, their basic skills like reading and writing and all that are so low that they can't handle college level work. That person could be successful, but they have a lot of work to do to build those skills up until they can handle what college asks them to do. So that's one. The second is this, and that is some students have good or even very good academic skills. You know, they're strong that way. But their habits as a student are very weak or very poor, and that always drags a student down and causes them not to do as well as they could do and probably as they should do. So I'm going to say this just to kind of start this, and that is I ask students all the time, because I think it's very interesting, what do you think makes a successful college student? Why would somebody be successful? And I don't know if you have thoughts that come to mind, but the two most common things that people tell me, one, somebody says, oh, I know why people are successful. They're really smart. And I say to them, it's nice to be smart. That's not it. I say, what else? And they say, well, they study like 15 hours a day. And I say, it's good to study and to take that seriously. That's not it either. Okay, and so what is it? That's kind of like it's not a mystery, but it's something that I've observed over the years. So what we're going to do for today to sort of have me teach this and work through it with you is I'm going to give you a handout and work through all of that and then ask you to do something for me near the end of the workshop. I'm going to put you to work on something that's pretty simple, but it requires a little bit of thought on your part. So let me go ahead and pass these out. If you could pass one behind you, please. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention earlier, when you show up for workshops this semester, a lot of them are going to be videotaped. If you could pass behind you. That's for people who aren't able to attend and all that. So no need to feel nervous or anything about a camera in the room. It's not on you. It's on me. So if anybody's going to be nervous, it would be me. And I'm okay because I'm sort of used to it. So just ignore the camera and you'll be fine, okay? When it comes to habits of successful college students, I want to start by reading the little section at the top, and then we're going to go through these one at a time, spend a couple of minutes on each one. At the very top it says, one main characteristic of successful college students is that they act in a professional way. In other words, they treat school as seriously as they would a high-paying career job. This is demonstrated in their attitude and day-to-day actions and habits. Everything they do shows that school is a very high priority in their lives. Now, some of you in here may have had a job before. Maybe you even are working now while you go to school. Even if you've never worked, you know that if you get a job, especially a good one that you don't want to lose, there are certain things you do, certain ways that you act and approach your job that are important, and if you don't do those, you may end up getting fired. And everybody knows those things, but then when they become students, a lot of people don't do any of those same things. They kind of get lazy or their habits sort of decline. And that's something, again, that we want to work on. So, again, if you were being paid $100,000 a year to go to school, that would be nice, right? You'd show up every morning at like 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, you're not getting paid, but all of you, I hope, are going to school so that you can get a good education and then get a job that it makes a lot more than you could have if you didn't go to college. So it's kind of going to get to you eventually. But The very first one of these is always a kind of a fascinating one to me. So I'm going to ask a few questions in a minute. And one thing that I want you to understand about the way that I teach my workshops is that I ask questions sometimes, and I want answers from anybody. And even if you get the wrong answer, that's okay. At least you're trying. And so I'm hoping to get some involvement. No pressure. Be relaxed about it. Okay. Number one, it says, this is again the description of a successful college student. They take care of themselves physically and emotionally, eating a well-balanced diet, exercising, getting appropriate amounts of sleep, dealing with stresses and difficulties in positive, healthy ways, etc., so they can have the concentration needed to make it through each class session and the stamina needed to make it through the ups and downs of a long semester successfully. Okay, so most people, when they read the first portion of this about taking care of yourself, everybody says, well, sure, of course, that's what you're supposed to do. But my question for you is, a lot of people read that and say, I know you're supposed to do that, but what does that have to do with being a good student? It almost doesn't seem like it has anything to do with it. Can you see a connection there between those two? Why would it be important to do that in order to be successful? Yeah, you want to be successful at both. What happened? Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't sleep well, then you'll be falling asleep in class.
Yeah, that's a good example of it. Anybody here have a class this semester that meets for 3 hours straight? A couple of you? Okay, that's fun, huh? Trying to stay awake, even if you like the class. What a lot of students do that is not good is that they don't take care of themselves. So they eat all junk food and fast food. They stay up late at night to watch TV or play video games or do whatever, and they end up getting very little sleep. They don't ever exercise. And then they walk into classes, and while the teacher's taking roll, they're already looking like this. They're already fading out before class even starts. Is there anybody here who's in college for the very first semester this semester? Got a couple people. Okay, those who have been around for a while know this, and even if you just raised your hand, you know it's really hard for you to concentrate well on a teacher for even an hour, let alone 2 or 3. It takes a lot of energy. It's hard. If you're tired, or if you're hungry, or if you're stressed out, it makes it almost impossible. And so I know that some people don't sleep well because they have problems sleeping. Other times people don't sleep enough because they have a child, for example, who's up half the night, and so they have to be up with them. So sometimes things are outside of your control, but other times you can control these things. And so what a lot of students do is that they end up not taking care of themselves, and then their work suffers as a student, not just concentrating in class, but everything that they do. And also, those who have been around the college a little bit know that a semester here at this college is 18 weeks. Is long. Is really long, and it's very tiring. It's like a long marathon run to get through. And one thing I see all the time, every semester, is that some of my students start out great. They got this great energy, and then about halfway through the semester, I see them start dying out, like they're running to the finish line and just, staggering, and they can't make it. In order for you to have the same amount of energy in the 17th and 18th week that you do at the beginning, that requires you to take care of yourself. And that's something that pretty much anybody can do. I know some things are outside your control, but that's the idea with number one. Now, as we go through these, what I want you to do is I want you to think about how you do in each one of these now. Just is this a strong area for you? Is it a weak area? Is it somewhere in the middle? And I'm going to have you kind of evaluate yourself at the end of the workshop. I'll explain that in a little bit. Okay, number 2. They're never absent from a class meeting unless a true emergency arises. Even on those days when they don't feel like showing up or it's not convenient to do so, they push themselves and attend anyway. True emergency absences might include personal illness, such as being contagious, under doctor's orders to stay home, etc. Family emergencies like serious illnesses or a funeral, etc. Legal requirements, jury duty, court appearances, or unexpected transportation issues like the car won't start or dies on the way to school. Now, the point I want to make here is that every one of those things that I just listed here, those are all really good reasons for not showing up to class. Every one of these is under the description for me of life interrupting school. You know, it's just those things happen. But the question that I want you to answer for yourself, you don't have to answer it for me, is when you don't have an emergency like this, do you always faithfully show up to every one of your classes, even when it's a hassle or even when you don't feel like it? Some people are really good with that, and they always show up faithfully unless they have an emergency. Other people have a hard time with that, and sometimes they just say, you know, I've had a long week, I'm just taking the day off. Or they have a morning class at 8 in the morning, and they hit the snooze button for the 4th time, and then they just say, oh, forget it, and then they go back to sleep. Usually students who have very, very good attendance, almost always on average, end up with higher grades than people who miss class a lot, and that should make sense to you. But again, there are certain students every semester of mine who want to do well, want to try hard, and so they have all the ability to do well, but they just have a really bad semester where they have a death in the family and then they're sick for 3 weeks or whatever, and it's just hard for them, and there's nothing they can do about it. But I'm going to write one thing up here on the board, and this is just for your information. Last semester in my class, I teach a class that is pass, no pass, so there are no letter grades, but it's C or above, you know, or below. Those students in my classes who ended the semester with anywhere from 0 to 3 absences, so they were good, you know, almost always there, 92% of them passed my class. It's a very high number, right? Those who were, and so that like 8% who didn't, and then those who were absent a lot, like 4 to 6 times, they dropped all the way down to 50% who passed. And so it's not just showing up, because you have work to do, you have tests to take and all that, but when you show up, you always know everything that's going on, you hear everything the teacher teaches, and it helps a lot. So sometimes students don't do well in college because they just aren't very disciplined in showing up whenever they possibly can, unless they have an emergency. So again, the question is, how do you do personally on that one? Now, number 3. This has 3 parts to it, so I'm going to talk about each one just for a minute. A lot of students don't do very well at this, and I don't know what your reaction is going to be when you read it, but that's true of a lot of people. It says, number 3, if they have to be absent, so if they have an emergency, they do 3 things that are designed to help them not fall too far behind and improve their chances of doing well on upcoming tests and assignments. The first thing they do is they call or email the instructor as soon as they know they'll miss class in order to find out what will be done during that class meeting and anything they will need to do before the next session. Okay, I want to stop there for a second. When a person has a job and they have a schedule of job shifts, and they find out that they are not going to be able to make it to work, what do? Yeah, they call. Do they have to sort of remember to do that? I don't think so. It's just sort of habit, like, oh, I can't make it in, pick up the phone and call. Well, the question is, when you know you're going to miss class, do you automatically run for the syllabus and get the phone number or the email address and contact the teacher? Some people do that well. Other people say, I never do that, never even think of it. And again, it's just a habit. Well, those of you who have classes that meet once a week, this is especially important, because I've had students in classes that I teach that are once a week who end up missing class, and that's a whole week's worth, right? Because it just meets once, and they don't contact me at all. They show up the next week, walk in, hi, how are you doing? I say, doing fine. How are you? Fine. And then I say, okay, everyone, I'm going to collect the homework now. And they look at me like, what homework? I gave assignment the week before and they have no clue. Well, that means they have to turn it in late, lose a lot of points for it, and all it would have taken would be like a 2-minute call or a one-line email, and then I would have gotten back to them and told them what they missed and what they needed to do. It's a very easy thing to do, but if you don't do it, you get way behind and you get confused. The second part of number 3 is they arrange to pick up copies of any important class papers like handouts, study guides, assignments, etc. from the instructor. They pick up the material at the instructor's office right before the next class meeting or in some other manner. So the students who do this right in my class know they're going to miss. They call or email me. Later that day, I contact them back and I tell them what they missed. And if there's something important like an assignment or a study guide, I either email it to them, I leave it for them so they can come pick it up or whatever so that they can catch up. And a lot of students, again, don't do that at all, and it's important for you to be in the habit of doing that. And then the third one, my favorite part of this, is they make sure to arrive at least 10 minutes early for the next class meeting so they can find and copy someone else's notes completely before that class begins. Okay, so I wanted to ask you a question, and I hope this is kind of easy, but I want to ask anyway. If a person is absent, why would it be important for them to get to class the next time 10 minutes early? Why shouldn't they just show up on time and then borrow someone's notes and copy them during class? What's the problem?
They won't be able to pay attention to what's going on in class.
Yes, they won't be able to pay attention to what's going on. So let me give you this example. I have seen this happen almost right in front of me before. It's like a show during the class. A student misses class. The next time there's class, they get there right on time, which is normally, good. And then right as I start teaching the new material for the day, I see the person do this. Hey, hey. And they get their elbow going, and the person next to them is, were you here last time? And they say, yeah. Can I see your notes? And they're kind of like this, like they're trying to swat a fly away. And they keep going. The elbow keeps going. And they finally say, all right. And so they give the notes. And then for about the next 10 minutes, the person is sitting there like this. Have you ever seen other people's notes? I don't know if you think your notes might be kind of scary. Other people's are almost unreadable except by them. And so I've even seen people say, what is this? Well, not only are they kind of distracting me, but they're also concentrating on that, so they're missing everything I'm teaching now. It just like compounds the problem. So if you're ever absent from a class that is a lecture type class and you know you're missing some notes, that's the first thing you should think about after those other two is I got to get there early so I can borrow someone's notes, copy them, ask them about whatever I don't understand, and then be ready as soon as the teacher starts talking and I can hear all the new material. And again, all of this sounds sort of common sense and all that, but most people don't do it. And most people don't do it because they never thought of doing it. Again, that's kind of part of what we're doing today. So if you've never been absent from school, would you do these things if you have been absent, or if you would be? And if you have been absent, did you do all these things? Some people say, I've never done any of those. Some people say, I did one, but I didn't do the other two. So this is just part of this today, is to think about your own performance, your own habits. Okay, number 4 is a really simple one. They always come to class prepared. This means consistently having the course syllabus, the textbook, if it's required by the instructor, a notebook containing past handouts, past notes, paper for new notes, pens, pencils, scantrons on test days, etc. Now, that should sound pretty obvious to you. A lot of my students show up and they always have everything they're supposed to have. Other people, it's an adventure. And I've had people get their elbow going again. A lot of students have wild elbows. And they come in and I start teaching and I see them doing this. Hey, hey. And the person says, yeah, you have an extra pen? And they say, yeah. And they reach and they give them one. Thanks. You have some paper? And they're just, elbowing. And I just look at that person, and again, I think of them as a professional student. If I went into a meeting at my job with my boss and all these other people, and it's a very important meeting, and I said, does anyone have a pen and paper? That would be really unprofessional for me, and everybody knows that, but then when it comes to being a student, like I said, people sometimes get kind of lazy with that. So when you show up to your classes, are you always prepared most of the time, or do you always forget something? Again, everybody is different with that. Okay, and then the last one on this side is they are consistently on time. or even a little early so they can be prepared for the class. Being on time pretty much without fail is a sign of respect for the instructor and class. It's a demonstration that school is important to them, and it's an important personal habit to apply to all life situations. You know that in this country, thousands of people get fired from jobs every day because they're late a lot. That's sad, especially in this economy. It's hard to find a job, so you don't want to lose it. Well, again, in my experience, it's almost the same as this. When my students show up on time, almost all the time, just maybe late a couple times during the semester, the numbers are almost the same as this. And when they show up late constantly, it becomes more like this. And that doesn't even have anything to do with the course work, but usually when someone is there and they're on time, it sort of means they're very serious about the class and they work hard on everything and end up doing well. So how are you with that, just in everything in your life? Do you always show up on time or early? Are you almost always late everywhere you go, or is it somewhere in between? Again, that's something for you to think about. Okay, so we'll go back to these in just a little bit, but you can go ahead and turn the page. And I want to talk about the rest of these. And by the way, just so that I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and start this sign-in sheet now. So again, when this gets to you, if you could just fill out the information and pass it along so it doesn't get stuck, that would be good. So I'd appreciate that. Okay, number 6 at the top of the back side is, I guess, a very important one to me personally, and I think it would be to you if you were a teacher also. It says, they are respectful to the instructor and to classmates at all times. This means that they pay attention during lectures, regardless of whether or not the topic being discussed is interesting. And they do that by staying awake, sitting up, working hard to listen, and sometimes it's hard, maintaining at least fairly frequent eye contact, etc. In addition, they avoid doing anything that will be distracting to others in the room. This includes having running conversations with classmates, having their cell phone ring, text messaging, or doing anything else unrelated to what's going on in class at that time. Well, as you look at all of that there, you know how you are as a person. You know a lot better than I do. When you're in your classes, do you do any of these things that are mentioned that aren't so good to do, or do you never do them? And I'll give you a couple of examples. I am always surprised when I see this. In my classes, it's actually a rule that if you have a cell phone with you, which almost everybody does, it needs to be turned off and put out of sight. Some people put their cell phone on silent or on vibrate, and then here's what happens. I see this all the time. They put it right next to them, so it's sitting there on the desk, and then they try to pay attention and take notes and all that, and then all of a sudden, it rings or goes off. They hear the or whatever, and I've seen students actually during class do this. And they're trying to pay attention to me, but they're so tempted, and they end up grabbing it and then under the table texting back. Okay, that's very distracting to the teacher. It's usually distracting to the people around them, and unless you have an emergency that you're waiting for word about, there's no way that you should be able to, you should be able to go like an hour, 2 hours without texting. Some people are addicted to texting, and so they almost can't. That's why it's better to just put it away and turn it off completely unless you have, again, an emergency that you're waiting for. Also, in addition to that, from this list here, I've had students before, many times, who have sat together, maybe with a friend of theirs, and they love talking. And I love when people talk, but not exactly while I'm talking. I think that's the same for you. You'd feel the same way. So I'm in the middle of teaching something important, and then I see a person, as soon as I finish saying something, they turn to the person next to them and they do this. And the other person, yeah. And then about 20 seconds later, I finish saying something else. Yeah, and so after a while, I end up saying something and then almost looking at them, waiting for them to talk, and everybody gets distracted around them. The other thing that I've seen, and I don't know if this is going to surprise you or not, it always surprises me even after all these years. I've seen some students sitting there while I'm teaching, and they have their notebook paper in front of them, and they're listening, and then when I say something, they do this. Okay, now that looks good, right? That looks normal, except when they're done, they do this. And then the person next to them, yeah. And they're passing notes during class. And I look at that and I think, if I wanted to see that, I'd be teaching middle school or elementary school. It's just very immature. So it's always important when you're in a class to be very respectful of your classmates and the teacher. You want to have an environment where you can really listen and concentrate without being bothered by everything. And teachers are especially bothered usually by everything that happens where it's not focusing directly on them. Okay, now number 7. I want to make a comment about this too. They realize that most college classes require several hours per week for homework, review, and other types of studying. With that in mind, they schedule time to study and most often choose to study even when other more attractive activities come up. They do this regardless of how they feel at any given time because doing well in school is very important to them. Okay, now, so here's what I'll say first about this. If you spend 10 hours a day studying, I will worry about you. I teach study skills, so I like it when people study, but you have to have balance in your life or you go crazy, so you need to enjoy things and all that. But what this one is about is this. I think this is true of most of you, maybe even all of you. You're in school right now, and you have a friend, like a good friend of yours, who's not in school. And that's an interesting combination because it seems like their whole goal in life is to tempt you to go away from what you need to do for school. And so I'm going to give you this example. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, but this is what a lot of people go through. Your best friend calls you at 6 o'clock at night. Hi, it's me. Hey, how you doing? Fine. A couple of us are going down the street to the restaurant there. Your favorite restaurant. We'll pick you up in a half hour. Now, that sounds good, right? Well, you have a test the next day, right? So you have a lot of studying you need to do. And you tell them, oh, you know what? I'd love to, but I can't. I got a test tomorrow. And the person says, hey, it's me. It's us. It's your favorite restaurant. Come on. Yeah. I'd like to, but no, I can't. I can't. Thanks anyway. They keep at you, and you start weakening, and you can feel yourself weakening, and finally you say, look, I got to study, and they say, study schmuddy, you could do that later some other time, and you say, okay, I'll just study late tonight and I'll stay up till 2 in the morning. I know that's not good, but I want to hang out with them. And so you go. Some students cave into the pressure and go somewhere else other than studying when they know they need to study all the time. Other people are really good about saying no and saying, I would love to, no. And the person says, yeah, but no. And they're good with that. And that's a good, kind of a good habit to have. I've had some students who hate studying so much that when they were about to sit down to study, if somebody called and they said, you want? They said, yes. Whatever it is, whatever I could do to get out of here and not study, it's like any excuse possible. So when you need to study, when something is important, are you really good at setting boundaries and saying no and sticking to it? Or do you give in all the time? Or are you somewhere in between? Again, that's always the question on all of these. Okay, and then number 8 is a pretty simple one also, and that is they work hard to follow all college and course rules and directions, written and verbal. This includes not being afraid to ask the teacher to repeat or clarify instructions during or after class, reading all written directions carefully, double-checking work for accuracy, etc. Now, this actually has 2 parts to it, so let me just give you a really quick explanation of this. Some of my students are really good, pretty much all the time, at following all the directions I give. So when they have an assignment to do or some due date or whatever, they're always on top of it and they know and they double check and all that. That's good. Always a few students who seem to never do things according to the directions. And I think they see the directions and then throw them away and just sort of do it whatever way. And that tends to hurt a student in college because when teachers ask you to do things a specific way, that's the way you need to do it. Well, the thing that I want you to think about here, because again, I don't know you, so I wouldn't know this, is the other part of this. One of the habits that you need to develop to get through college and to get a degree or whatever you're going for is the ability to not be afraid of teachers. Some people tell me they're afraid of teachers. And what I mean by that is you need to be assertive as a student. Now, assertive doesn't mean rude or obnoxious or aggressive, but it means assertive. And what a lot of students do is that when a teacher teaches something or gives directions to them and they're confused about any part of it, their attitude is, I'm not really sure what you meant by that. And so before they leave the room that day, they come up to the teacher and say, could you please explain such and such again? So they refuse to leave until they understand. That's good. Other people, though, are extra shy or afraid to talk to teachers, or they think it's rude to go up to a teacher, so they just leave the room and say, well, I'll try to figure it out at home. And usually that's not very good. I always tell my students at the beginning of the semester that I never want to see you walk out of the room at the end of class looking like this. You know, that's a bad look. Like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. Talk to me. There are a few teachers that I've had who are scary. And I wouldn't even want to go up and talk to them because they're pretty mean and all that. But most teachers aren't like that, and they want to help you, and they're available to answer and explain. But you have to go. You have to be the one to do that. Okay? And then number 9. They make a major effort to turn in all homework assignments on time or early, realizing the problems that can be caused by turning work in late. Lost points, lower grade, increased stress, etc. So again, as a person, as a student throughout your life, but especially now these days, do you almost always turn in all assignments on time or early? Or is everything late? Or is it sort of half and half? And so again, we'll kind of examine this in a minute. And then the last one of these, and then I'm going to put you to work a little bit, is number 10. And I just want to take a couple of minutes with this. It says they seek to learn from their mistakes and treat disappointments like low grades as motivation for doing better on future tests and assignments rather than giving up or getting discouraged easily. They talk to their instructors in such cases so they can improve their performance as the semester goes on. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by this. Here's what happens to some of my students, and it's not good. I understand it, but it's not good. They take the first test of the course in the 4th or 5th week, and they get it back, and they look at the grade, and they're disappointed. Maybe they got a D or an F. That's never fun to see, right? They look at it. They give the test back, they leave, never see them again. So it's like somebody took a pin and just put it in the balloon, and they just sort of give up after one, bad grade. Other people, though, do the right thing, and that is when they get a grade like that, they look at it and they're disappointed in the grade, but here's what their reaction is. They look at it and they see a D or an F, and they say this, all right, that's what grade I got. That's not good. That's the last time I'm ever going to get a grade that low in this class. And so they come to me and they talk to me about how they studied for the test and all of that, and I give them suggestions and try to help them know how to study better, so they treat it as a challenge. Never will that happen again, and that's the better way rather than just giving up. So when you are faced with a disappointment like that, do you tend to just give up? Or do you make it a challenge like that, or is it some of each? Again, depends on the person, okay? So, one thing that I want to explain before we get to this last little part here, did the sign-in sheet make it all the way to the back there? Sign-in sheet? Okay. And you two didn't sign, right? Okay. If you could just pass that up, we'll get it to the two of them. Thanks. One of the things that I wanted to tell you is that some people have experience as a student all the way through elementary school and middle school and high school or whatever that tends to be not so good. So in other words, they're just never a very good student. And so what a lot of students tell me when they start college is, I'm not a good student. And I say, well, how do you know? I said, well, I just never have been a good student. I just never get really good grades. And I said, well, that doesn't mean you can't be a good student now. And they say, yeah, but I'm just not smart enough, or whatever. They come up with all these ideas. all the way through college, you need to work on your skills, your academic skills, your reading and writing and all those, because those always need to get better for everybody. But I want you to think back at what we just did, all 10 of these. None of these are skills. There's no skill involved here at all. They're just habits. And if they're habits, that means everybody in here can become great at all of these. There's no excuse for saying, well, I can't do that, I can't do that. Everybody can do these. And if a student gets to the point where they're really good at all of these, it doesn't mean that they're going to be successful in college for sure, but it helps a lot. It gives them a big advantage over everybody else. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and we're going to just do sort of a short version of this, is this. The little blanks you see, you may have wondered, what are those blanks doing there? What I'm going to have you just start to do a little, and just so you kind of understand how this works, is that I ask my students when we go through this to look at each one of those and be very honest with themselves, because they're the only one who's going to see it, so it's just honesty, and to give themselves a grade from A down to F, anywhere in there that they think is their grade for that right now. And so I have people giving themselves, A, C, F, D, B, whatever. They give themselves grades. So what I want you to do is just take a minute or two and at least look at the first few of these. You don't have to read them again because we already went over them. And just sort of react and think, is that a strength of mine? Am I really bad at that? Or is it somewhere in the middle? And just give yourself a grade, again, from A down to F. Some people like a plus or a minus in there. If you want to do that, you can. But it's mostly to come up with a grade. And I'll let you just do that at least with the first 5 here. And then I'll explain the last little part and then we'll be done. So go ahead and kind of look at each one. And again, just be honest. You're not turning this into me, so it's just for you. Okay. If you get through the front side and you want to go to the back, and keep going, you may not get all the way through, and that's okay. I don't exactly expect that, but I'll just give you another minute or so. And then, as I said, I'll just finish up with a couple of other comments. Okay. Regardless of where you are in that, you can go ahead and just stop for 1 minute, and I want to just show you the last little part of this. And again, you can feel free to do this or not on your own. It would just take a couple of minutes, and we're going to be done here with our workshop in just a minute, so you can do that whatever way you'd like. At the bottom of the back side, some of you have already seen this and some not, it says, which 2 of the 10 areas do you feel you need to improve in the most this semester? So that would obviously be the 2 lowest grades that you gave yourself. And then it says, what specifically will you do so improvement will happen? And so the one thing I wanted to give you as sort of advice for this, what you want to do is put a number like number 1 or 5 or 7 here. But the one thing not to do is, if you're going to fill this out and finish the sentence, I've had students show me this to me, and they wrote, to improve in that area this semester, I will try harder, or I will do better. And that's not good enough. It needs to be more specific than that. So for example, I'll give you a couple of ideas. Some people give themselves a low grade in the very first one, and they give themselves like a D or an F, and then they put number 1, and then they say, to improve in that area this semester, I will make sure to go to bed by 11 o'clock every night during school, during the week, and try to cut down on my junk food. So that's a very specific, plan. That's what you want to do. Or someone might say, they have a tendency to have their cell phone in class a lot, and so they realize number 6, yeah, that's probably something I need to work on. So to improve in that area this semester, I'll always make sure to turn off my cell phone before class begins or whatever. So that's what you want to put, whatever that might be, is to try to be really specific and come up with a plan that you can actually follow instead of just being very general about it, which is what a lot of people do. The more general you are in writing something down, the less you usually do it. But if it's specific, then you can work on it. Okay, so the last thing that I want to share with you, and again, I appreciate you coming today. Next week we'll get into the subject of time management, like I mentioned, is this. This is totally up to you. I can't, in these workshops, I can't give homework. That's why everybody likes these. because I just sort of teach you and then off you go. But I would suggest this, it's up to you, and that is keep this, and then later in the semester, like 4, 5, 6 weeks from now, pull it out, look it over again, look at the grades you gave yourself, see if things have changed, especially look at these and say, am I doing my plan or not? And if you are, you should notice an improvement. And if you're thinking, oh yeah, that was a good plan, I haven't even done it yet, then just start, kind of remind yourself. And again, every student is like a work in progress. In other words, everyone is sort of learning and improving as time goes by. And so by the end of the semester, I would hope that you could look back to any grade you gave yourself that was kind of low or very low and realize, I'm still not great at that, but I'm much better than I was the third week of the semester. And that is kind of exciting to see that you're making progress as you go. Okay, so that's the idea with that. Okay, any questions on anything? Okay, thank you very much for coming.